Okay, so now once you're comfortable with the modules and you're comfortable with the concepts and you already know that you have multiple options to do the practical hands-on labs, let's start with some in-depth learning of Azure Architectural Components. In this case, first we are going to focus on core Azure Architectural Components. So we are going to talk about Azure regions, regional pairs, sovereign regions. We are going to talk about Azure zones and data centers. Now, then we have certain things which are terminologies described by Azure, like we have something called resources and resource group. We have Azure subscription. We have management groups, which is mostly group of multiple subscriptions created by organization. Now, we need to understand all these terminologies because these terms are going to be useful throughout this course. And we need to understand how the hierarchical structure of Azure Cloud is actually created with that. So we will describe the hierarchy of resource group, subscriptions, and management group, and we'll understand how to organize our resources properly. That's what the main goal of this module. Let's start with regions. I think in my previous learning path, I have already shown you a world map kind of a map, and I discussed that there are multiple regions, and in each region multiple data centers are there. So we have total 60 plus regions available across the globe in 140 plus different countries. Now these regions are made up of one or more data centers, minimum one, maximum 3 data centers are going to be there in the close proximity. They provide flexibility and scale to reduce customer latency. Regions are going to be preserving data residency with a comprehensive compliance offering. And not only that, we also know that all these regions are connected with each other. So whenever we want to transfer data, whenever we want to configure things like disaster recovery and all, it's going to be much easier for us. In each region, you have multiple data centers. Now, when we want to understand that, it is going to be very important to understand that you understand the term called availability zone. Now, availability zone is something which is a physically separated locations within one Azure region. Because if one Azure region is going to have 3 data centers in that, we do not call those things data center 1, 2, and 3. We call them availability zone 1, availability zone 2, availability zone 3, something like that. So this is going to make sure that this is going to make your availability to the next level. These are physically separated data centers within the same region, and each data center is equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking. Even nowadays, there are many Azure regions which are having at least one of the availability zone based on a solar power. So they do this kind of things also, that Microsoft makes sure that one availability zone is based on solar. So if we have some energy outage or some other issues related to energy, not all the availability zones will get affected by that. After this, we have to understand region pair. Yes, we have 60 plus regions available in Azure Cloud. And yes, those regions are spread across the globe. But then there is one more thing, which is regional pair. Every Azure region is paired with one another region, minimum one another region. And Microsoft makes sure that this is actually going to be at least 300 miles away. Now, why exactly we are doing this? It's because if one of the region is getting affected by some kind of a natural disaster or some other disaster things, then we do not want to lose our data. We want to make sure that at least one copy of our data will be available. To maintain this high availability, they do automatic replication of some data services into the paired region. Remember, because every region is at least paired with one another region, which is 300 miles away from that, there are less chances that both the regions are getting impacted by the same disaster. And even they make sure that if they are going to roll out any updates, they make sure that they are going to roll out this update sequentially. First, they are going to make sure it is up and running in the one region, then only it is going to be done in the paired region. You can see right now, there are some regions which are listed here, like East US is paired with West US, Japan East is connected with Japan West, same way North Europe is connected with West Europe. Now you can see the full list of this in the mentioned link which is here, which is showing you paired region. I strongly recommend you to go through that particular link because is this link, I think, yes. This is showing you how Azure cross-region replication is working. So you can clearly see that we have some regions which are having 3 zones inside that. This is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. And on the same link, if you scroll down, they are going to show you the list of the paired regions. You can see list of all the regions with the pairing A and pairing B is mentioned. There are chances, there are some regions which are connected with more than one regions. Like you can see in the India, Central India is connected with South India, Central India is paired with West India also. Possibilities are there, but minimum one region is always going to be paired in that. This is what paired regions are trying to show you. Now, after regional pairs, let's move forward. We have something which is known as Azure sovereign regions. Now, these are those regions which are specifically used for US government services. So this is going to meet the security and compliance needs of the US federal agencies, states and the local governments and their solution providers. Azure government is going to make sure that they should have a separate instances of Azure which are physically also isolated, and these are some which are dedicatedly useful for Azure and US governments only. This is something which is accessible only to a screen authorized personnel. Everyone is not allowed to the physical infrastructure or on-premise kind of resources for that. To know more about this, you can just search on any search engine like Bing, and you can just search for the word Azure government and you'll get more information about that. Then we have something which is Azure sovereign regions, Azure China. Maybe you know, may not, but Microsoft is China's first foreign public cloud service provider in compliance with government regulations. We know that China is one of the country where the regulations and the rules of the governments are little weird compared to many other countries. Azure is one of the partner and Microsoft is one of the leading partner there for cloud resources, and that's the reason Azure China is giving you the features like this, which are physically separated instance of Azure cloud services operated by 21 ViaNet, which is a company associated with that, and all the data stays within the China to ensure the compliance which are mandatory from the Chinese government. Now this is something which is not very useful for the AZ-900 certification exam, but the good information to know. Now, let me take you to something which is that explore the globe kind of an infrastructure. Actually, I have already taken you to that explore the globe kind of a global infrastructure of Azure. I think you have already seen this thing in the previous learning path, but still if I just go to that, this is that particular globe which is showing you that this is a world map, and then each dot represent one region. You can click on the region and get the information about that, whether this is having how many zones, this is located in which city, as well as you can play with these legends. You can tick mark those things and you can understand what services are available in that. I do not want to waste much time in this because we already discussed this thing in the previous one, but this is a useful link to remember, which is going to give you proper details about how a global infrastructure of Microsoft data centers are spreaded across. Now let's move to the next slide, which is talking about Azure resources. Azure resources are components like storage, virtual machine, and networks that are available to build cloud solutions. Now, as we discussed earlier, that if you want to develop anything with Azure, you have multiple tools where one of the website which is known as Azure Portal is available. Whenever you create anything in Azure Portal, maybe you create virtual machine, maybe you create storage account, maybe you create a database. Everything which is you're creating in Azure is known as resource. Like right now also, if I go to my browser and if I go to this portal.azure.com, on the home page itself, we have a button called Create a Resource. If I click on this create a resource kind of a button, it is going to show me that yes, I can create virtual machine or a web application or a database or maybe function app. Everything what you create here is ultimately a resource. And whenever you're going to create these kind of resources, those resources are actually going to be stored in the cloud in some kind of a term called resource group. Well, that is something which we need to see next. So these are the resources. And when you create this kind of resources, obviously those resources are going to be related to each other. Maybe for one of my particular client, I am going to create one virtual machine, one database, and some storage accounts. If all of them belongs to one client, it is advisable that I group them into one logical grouping. That logical grouping is nothing but resource group. A resource group is a container, or I always say it's a logical grouping, you use to manage and aggregate resources in the single unit. A resource can exist in only and only one resource group. A resource can exist in a different region. So there are chances that you have one resource group where you have some resources belongs to one region while the other resources belongs to some other region. This is the reason I said that it's a logical grouping. Resources can be moved to a different resource group if required. And applications can utilize multiple resource groups. So there are chances that you have some applications which can be associated with multiple resource groups. That's possible. Now, this is something which is a resource group. Every time when you're going to create something in Azure, it will be a resource, and that is always going to locate to at least one resource group. Now, if we are having resources which are inside resource group, the obvious question which we can have in the mind is, resource group will be inside what? Well, resource groups are going to be inside your subscription. An Azure subscription provides you with authenticated and authorized access to Azure account. We just discussed before this that we need to have an Azure account. Now, once you have an Azure account, inside that one Azure account, which you have maybe activated with your credit card, you are going to have one or more subscriptions. Maybe you are working in an organization where you're a developer and they have given you a developer subscription. With you, maybe there are some other developers also who are part of that subscription. Or maybe you are just a student and you have activated a student subscription for Microsoft and you're the only person who's having that subscription, and that subscription is having very limited resources in that. So that is something what we call Azure subscription. Technically, Azure subscription is best useful to maintain the billing boundaries. It can generate a separate billing reports and invoices for each subscription, so that at the end of the month, you will get to know that how much you have to pay for a particular resource and for the given time. It is also going to help you to access control boundaries. You can manage the control access to the resources that users can provision with a specific subscription. This is going to help you to avoid unnecessary confusion in who created this resource, why this resource is actually charged so much, why you do not need to delete this thing manually. All these answers are going to be coming with that access control boundaries. So I will make sure that my test subscription users can only do limited amount of things in that, and maybe my production subscription users will have higher rights than that. This all configurations will be managed easily by Azure subscriptions. Last but not the least, we have management groups. As we are going through the hierarchical structure right now, we understood resources. Resources are those things which we have created in Azure Cloud. Every resource will belong to a resource group. So multiple resources can be there inside one resource group. Resource group will be under subscription, and likewise subscriptions will be under one Azure account. That's what we have seen in the previous slide. But Azure account is nothing but a user identity who's accessing that. From the organization point of view, subscriptions will be under management group, because there are chances one subscription can have an associated access with multiple user accounts. So the hierarchy of Azure follows like this. Management group can include multiple subscription. Subscription inherit the conditions applied on the management group. So it's like a parent-child kind of inheritance is going to happen. And then the limit is this: you can have 10,000 management groups which can be supported in a single directory. So when you create an Azure tenant or a directory, one directory can have 10,000 management groups, and then each management group can have multiple subscriptions, resource groups, and resources likewise. A management group tree can support up to 6 levels of depth. So not only one management group. When you are creating 10,000 management groups in your organization, you maybe have one management group, then a nested level of management group inside that, then another nested level of management group. This kind of up to 6 levels depth you can create. Now, if you are a senior person, and in future if you're going to appear for maybe Azure Architect level certification like AZ-305 kind of a certification exam, then this kind of hierarchical structure management of management group is one of the necessary skill set of yours. But as of now, it's out of the scope of this course, so we are not going into that. Let's move forward to next, which is an exercise. You need to understand how you can create Azure resource, especially the most important resource of Azure, which is a virtual machine. As we know, you need to have an Azure account, you need to have an activated Azure subscription in order to do this kind of a lab. I make sure that you are going to understand the creating Azure resource kind of lab at least. So normally we are not going to focus on the labs of the videos, association, things like that. As I already mentioned, you should have an Azure subscription from Microsoft, or if you do not have, feel free to connect with us and we will provide a scalable kind of a lab environment on a chargeable basis for AZ-900. For this, you can contact us on the mentioned number which was mentioned in the previous video. But as of now, this create an Azure resource kind of a virtual machine, I am going to show you in the lab using my own subscription. We are going to create a new virtual machine so that you can understand all these terminologies which we have discussed properly. Let's look at that video. So I'm there in my portal.azure.com. I was there in the home page of this Azure portal, and I'm going to click on create resource. Now I can create whichever resources I want, and you can see here we have resources like virtual machine, web app, database, and right side we have specific products also available. Like if I want to create a specific version of operating system based virtual machine like Windows, Windows 11, Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, I can choose them. Let me click on this one, which is virtual machine, and I'm going to click on create. Now if you follow Microsoft Learn exercise, they are allowing you to create a virtual machine and they are showing you steps with PowerShell scripting. I do not want to use PowerShell scripting right now, so I'm just going to use my simple Azure portal UI so that we can create a virtual machine with this and we can understand how to use the UI. I'm going to select one of my subscription, which is Azure PaaS sponsorship. Inside the subscription, I maybe have already some resource groups. Those resource group will be visible in the drop down if it is there. If it is not there, I can create a new resource group under the subscription. Let's say I'm creating a new resource group name, which is AZ-900 RG. This is my AZ-900 RG. So this is a resource group. RG stands for resource group, and I'm creating this resource group for this particular course. I'm going to click on OK. What will be my virtual machine name? Well, I want to give a name. This is Maruti VM01. This is my virtual machine number 1, which I want to create. It is always advisable when you are creating any resources in Azure which requires a unique name, you give your name in the beginning of that and you end it with some number so that it's not going to create any conflict. I can choose my choice of region. We have plenty of regions available in our subscription. I'm going with East US right now. I can choose the availability options, whether I want to do this deployment with the specific availability zones or I do not want any high availability configuration. I can do that. I am specifying that this virtual machine will be created inside the zone 1 of that particular region. Now there are chances if you select a region which is not having multiple zones, like for example, we have a region which is Central India or South India. Yeah, South India is one of the region which is not having any kind of availability zones in that. If I choose that region, you can see the zone option is gone. And if I choose the region like East US, then only the zone option is going to be available. Azure portal is very smart enough to understand that. Let me choose East US. In the zone 1, I'm creating this virtual machine. I'm going with the default configuration of security type. I do not want to change it. But in the virtual machine images, let me say I want to create a virtual machine which is going to have Windows Server operating system right now. Windows Server 2019 data center is, I think, a perfect choice for myself. I'm selecting this. Below that, it is asking me what kind of a virtual machine size you want. Based on the virtual machine size, I need to pay the amount. I'm going to click on see all sizes, and they are showing me that there are chances in my region which I have selected, these sizes are not available. It's showing me you have some sizes which are having 8 cores, 4 cores and all. You have to go for those sizes. And if you do not want to go for the sizes, then there are chances you go back and you change the region which you have configured for this. Now let me do one thing. Let me change the region right now to, let's say, something better, and I'm going with the West US region. Let me see if in the West US region it is available or not. I'm choosing West US, and yes, in West US region maybe my bigger sizes which are standard D4SV3 is available, which is giving me 4 CPU, 16 GB RAM with this monthly cost. Don't worry about the monthly cost. They will not charge you this amount right now. If you keep this virtual machine running for 1 month, then you have to pay this amount. I'm scrolling down. It's asking me that if this is a virtual machine with this operating system, provide your administrator username. Once the virtual machine is created, I want to connect to that virtual machine using this username and password. So I'm providing the credentials. My username will be this. My password is there. It is going to provide a public inbound port, which is by default right now configured for RDP with the port number 3389. Now I hope you already know that for most of the Windows machines we use RDP, and for most of the Linux machines we use SSH. Now you can disable these ports. I'm going with the default configuration of RDP, and I'm just going to click on next. We have a configurational options available here. We have a disk configuration where I can choose my operating system disk type, or I can also add an additional disk which I can attach to this virtual machine. We have a networking where they are going to create a separate virtual network with subnet and a public IP configuration for me so that I can access the virtual machine. Now if you want to customize all these options, you can do that thing. But we'll understand networking and network security groups and all other things in the coming videos. So right now, I'm not going with all these things. I'm going with all the default configuration, and I'll just click on next, next, next. When I go with all the next configuration, the last tab is always review plus create, which will take some time to validate my configuration. If the configuration is correct, it's going to show me validation is successfully passed, and then it's going to show me an estimated cost which they are going to charge me per hour. As we already discussed, Microsoft Azure Cloud is a public cloud which will charge you on a pay-as-you-go basis. So right now, this is showing me that I have to pay around 34.77 Indian rupees per hour. Because I'm located in India, it's showing me currency which is INR. Based on your location, you will get the respective currencies. I'm okay with this cost, and I'm going to click on create. When you submit the deployment, this will go to the West US region of Azure. In that, it's going to create a physical infrastructure resource for you, the CPU, the memory, the operating system, whatever configurations you have asked for. Because virtual machine is an infrastructure as a service, this infrastructure will be provided to you as a service. And once this is done, it's going to show you that this resource is available for you so that you can use it. As of now, this deployment is going to take some time. So it's showing me a page that your deployment is in progress. Any deployment of an Azure resource in Azure Cloud can take up to initially maybe on an average 4 to 5 minutes, or maybe it can go up to even 20 to 30 minutes. There are some infrastructure resources which can take a longer than usual time. Virtual machine is not that. So virtual machine deployment can be done in approximately 3 minutes. Let's wait for that, and then we'll see whether this deployment is completed and virtual machine is running or not. Yes, I think my deployment is completed. Let me click on Go to Resource. When I click on Go to Resource, I just want to make sure that my location which I have selected is correct. The status of my virtual machine is running, and it is having the same operating system which I have selected. Once that is done, I want to make sure that my virtual machine, if it is running, I should be able to connect to it. In order to connect to this virtual machine, we have options like I can connect using RDP or I can connect via Bastion. I recommend Bastion when you want a secure connection and you do not want to expose a public IP to your client. But as of now, we will go with the connect option, which is going to allow me to connect to this virtual machine using that public IP address. It has an option here that I can choose my native RDP, and I'm going to click on download RDP file. The file is downloaded. I'm going to double click on that. The moment this is showing me that RDP file, is asking me to provide my credentials. Now depends upon your laptop configuration, you have to provide your credentials. If you're using your office laptop, I recommend you to go for more choices. Click on use a different account. Provide the username with // and your username. My username was Maruti. I provided / before that. And then I'm providing my password, which I have given at the time of creating virtual machine. After username and password, I'm going to click on OK, which is going to take me to another pop-up like, do you really trust the certificate? Yes, I trust it. I know what I'm doing. This is Azure specific certificate, which I want to allow. The moment I say yes, my remote desktop connection is going to process it and it's going to show me that I have successfully connected to my remote desktop connection. The username, the first time logging is happening in this virtual machine. Now you can see my background machine is my physical machine, but this panel is showing me my remote desktop connection, which is a virtual machine with Windows Server operating system, which we have just now created in this lab inside one specific resource group. This is my remote machine, so I can go to the start menu, I can go and do whatever I want to do. Because it's a Windows Server operating system, it is configuring and opening some server manager. This is a full-fledged server. This is a full-fledged virtual machine where I can do whatever I want to do inside this. I can install software. I can create some more administrator users. This is an infrastructure as a service. So technically, I can do whatever I want. As of now, I don't want to do anything in this virtual machine. So I'm going to disconnect from that. Once the virtual machine is disconnected, I want you to click on resource groups. Now, you can get the resource group from the home page also, which is the exact next button after create resource. When I click on resource group, it's going to show me that I have a new resource group available, which is AZ-900RG. This resource group actually based on the subscription Azure PaaS sponsorship, which I have selected while creating this virtual machine. Now I think you understand that subscription is going to have resource group, and if I go inside the resource group, every resource group can have one or more resources inside that. Because I created virtual machine, which has some other resources connected with that, like public IP address, network security group, virtual network, disk, and network interface card. All these things are now inside this one resource group. And that's why these are the logical resources which are bounded with this logical resource group. And all of them belongs to West US location. I advise you, if you are using your personal subscription or you are using a free Azure subscription, once you're done with each and every lab, you have to delete those resources, because keeping this resource continuously running inside this environment will cost you every hour. It is advisable once you're done with the resource creation and if you're done with the lab, you click on delete resource group. This will make sure that once the resource group is deleted, you will not be charged for that. So right now, if I have used this virtual machine for maybe 5 minutes, it's going to charge me for only those 5 minutes. I'm going to provide the name of the resource group and I'm going to click on delete. When you delete the resource group, everything which is inside that resource group will also be deleted. Like creation is going to take few minutes of time, deletion also going to take few minutes of time. I'll wait for this to be deleted, and once the deletion is done, the resource group and all the resources inside that will not be visible on my Azure portal account. I hope you understood this lab, and I hope you understood the terminology and hierarchy which we have seen in this.